America Meditating Radio Show, we collect wisdom, inspire each other, and empower hearts 24/7. Hi, I'm Sister Jenna. Join me and guest on Blog Talk Radio as we amplify stories that compel us to be more for ourselves and everyone else around us.
Hi, I'm Angela Peabody of Global Woman Peace Foundation, and I listen to America's Meditating Radio Show.
I'm Ivy Hilton, and you are listening to America Meditating Radio Show.
Do you like to meditate? Have you tried to meditate? Have you struggled with meditation? Why don't you visit one of the Brahma Kumaris Meditation Center? Visit brahmakumaris.org.
The Miracle Medical Clinic is a clinic that has been providing quality health care services to the Houston area since 1996. In a comfortable environment, they are dedicated to helping you live a healthy lifestyle for years to come. For more information, please call 713-464-0236 or visit us at our website at www.miraclemedicalclinic.com. The Miracle Medical Clinic, where preventive health care is waiting for you.
Get off the grid and step inside your heart. Sister Jenna guides you through a powerful, encouraging, and motivating meditation that allows you to let go and become aware of you, regain strength, power, and peace.
The Meditation Museum in Silver Spring, Maryland offers a variety of courses and activities to make your life go a whole lot smoother. Located at 9525 Georgia Avenue, you will be able to experience the beautiful silence that's in the space. There are courses in Raja Yoga meditation, positive thinking, stress-free living, and personal development classes. For more information, call us at 301-588-0144 or visit us online at meditationmuseum.org.
Everything I need, I already have. Everything I need, I already have. Everything that I have a right to claim, trust. Every person who belongs in my circle of love will find me. Every person who belongs in my circle of love will find me. Every purpose for which I came here will be fulfilled. Every purpose for which I came here will be fulfilled. I trust. I trust. Everything I no longer need will make way for something new. Everything I no longer need will make way for something new. Everything I need, I already have. Everything I need, I already have. I trust. I trust in life.
Welcome, everyone. What a beautiful way to start the show today. That was Carmen Warrington. Her meditation was I Trust. And thanks for all the shout-out from our friends from all over the nation for being such faithful fans of the America Meditating Radio. I'm your host, Sister Jenna, and in the studio with me is also the beloved Sister Gita. And today we're going to have a heart-to-heart conversation with Matthew Fox, who is an Episcopal priest and theologian. And before we get Matthew on the air, I think my focus of today's conversation for us over the air is, again, the Meditate the Vote. I was at the Meditation Museum today, and the nicest people came in this afternoon, and the conversation went around how do we stand up and become powerful enough for ourselves despite who is the authority in our lives. It can stem from a mother, a father, a big brother, a big sister, an aunt, an uncle, a grandmother. But sometimes I might not always do the right things or say the right things, but what's my responsibility to myself? So Meditate the Vote gives us a chance to choose the kinds of thoughts that we can have for our own lives so we can feel our own connectivity in our own spirituality. The energy of spirit, the energy of light, the energy of divinity and power. And so I can leave that for you to percolate on. And we're inviting everyone to become our friends, please, on Meditate the Vote, Facebook and Twitter. The conversation of engagement there began on May 1st, and we will end it on November 8th. And the core questions are there. Are you powerful enough to affect change? What do you value the most about the country? Are you worthy? What are you doing that's bringing people together? We want to hear that. We want to know that, and that's really going to be important for us because it's a time for us to find a way to connect at a heart level and at definitely a very meaningful and spiritual level. So our show is very proud to welcome Matthew Fox. Matthew is an Episcopal priest and theologian who holds a doctorate in spirituality, and Matthew has authored over 30 books on spirituality and contemporary culture that have been translated in 60 languages. Matthew has devoted 45 years to developing and teaching the tradition of creation spirituality, and in doing so has reinvented forms of education and worship, is inclusive of today's science and world spiritual traditions, and is said to have awakened millions to the much-neglected, earth-based, mystical tradition of the West. Today we welcome Matthew to the air. Hello, Matthew. Welcome.
Hello. Good to be with you, sister-jenna.
Same here. Well, we've been enjoying some of your conversations and your videos, and it's clear that you're being called to give us some more information. You know, it's so important to not live off of just phrases or quotation, but to find some meaning between the beginning, the middle, and the end. You know, there has to be a beginning, there has to be a middle, there has to be and then a new beginning, wouldn't you say? So whenever we go onto this path of listening like I'm feeling something is different than what I've been trained to believe. Could you share with our listeners, Matthew, how did your journey begin? What opened you up to so much more than what you knew?
Well, I think a combination of beginning to realize the suffering of the world and brokenness there was in it, but also the experiences of awe and wonder and how much glory and beauty there is in life, and trying to reconcile the two and try to live deeply in response to both. The mystics call that the via positiva, the awe and the beauty, and then the via negativa includes silence. You talk about deep listening, but it also includes the awareness of suffering and not shutting our eyes to it, but letting it penetrate us also.
Right, I get that. And how old were you when you were really starting to find that awakening or opening?
Well, when I look back at my life, I read Tolstoy's War and Peace when I was a junior in high school, and I told a friend it burst my soul wide open. I wanted to experience what happened to me, and then later I had words for it, and that it was a mystical experience to see the world through the eyes of Tolstoy. So that was one thing, and then when I was 12, I had polio and I lost my legs. Couldn't tell me if I'd ever walk again. So that experience of loss and waiting was an experience that certainly affected me. And when I did get my legs back about a year later, I remember saying to the universe, I'll never take my legs for granted again. And of course I was elated, but I think that's kind of a mystical way of seeing the world too, not to take for granted, for example, each of our breath, the gift.
Which we do now. I mean, the things that we're just doing with our bodies and the way we're not taking care of ourselves, it's like we don't seem to understand how precious it is to breathe. You are known as an early and influential exponent of a movement that came to be known as creation spirituality. Can you educate me, please? What is creation spirituality?
Yes, I learned about this movement when I did my doctoral studies in Paris at the Institut Catholique there. And it was the Catholic Thomas Merton who advised that I go there to study spirituality. So my mentor, Père Chenou, a French Dominican, he named this tradition, and he pointed out it's the oldest tradition in the Bible. It's the tradition of the J source, who's the oldest tradition in the Bible. And it's about the goodness of creation, the blessing, the original blessing that creation is. And of course, the West has been burdened by this notion of original sin, but that's not biblical, it's not Jewish. Jesus never heard of original sin, no Jew has. So it's pretty strange, really, that so much of the Western Church has invested in original sin, and in the process has shut our eyes to the great gift that the universe is, and that we are as participants in the beauty and the blessing the universe is. And now science, of course, has added so many more details, letting us know that the universe has been on a journey for 13.8 billion years, and that we're very latecomers to the table, we humans. So all that is about blessing. Now that the creation tradition is about wisdom, not just knowledge, and wisdom in the Bible, as it is around the world, is feminine. So it's about a balance, too. The creation tradition is about balancing the masculine and feminine energies in ourselves and in our institutions and in our cultures. And this is very down-to-earth consequences. For example, how we define education. Do we include the right hemisphere of the brain that Einstein identified as intuition? And he says he abhors American education because intuition is lacking. We're not developing the right hemisphere of the brain. And this tradition is very prophetic and it's very ecological because wisdom is understood resides in nature. And so it's not just in books but in nature. So we have to learn to read nature and to find the revelation and the divine there. Thomas Aquinas, a great 13th century saint and thinker, said that Revelation comes in 2 volumes, nature and the Bible, not just the Bible. And this has been lost, I think, for centuries in the modern era because we've had our noses in books and texts, which are man-made, and of course books aren't a bad thing, but when they eliminate our relationship to nature, then we get stuck with an ecological crisis that we have today with climate warming and all the rest. So the sacredness of creation itself is celebrated in the creation-spirituality tradition. And this is a tradition, the wisdom tradition of Israel. Scholars agree the historical Jesus came from that tradition, that it's not a book tradition so much as it is a nature tradition. And the great medieval mystics, Hildegard of Bingen, Meister Eckhart, Francis of Assisi, Thomas Aquinas, all these people were very much in that tradition, and they were fighting the dualisms of Augustine and the put-down of nature that he inherited from Neoplatonism and other sources. So true spirituality is a mystical tradition. It's a prophetic tradition that is keen on social change and ecological responsibility, and it honors the wisdom of women as well as works to try to clean up the sacred masculine as well.
I agree, bringing the world back by using the feminine principles, because I think that, it's a cycle. Don't you think, Matthew, it's a cycle? The patriarchal process played its part, and it's very important, and now we need this more, I guess, this matriarchal approach, this feminine approach, maybe coming from my limited view, to just complete the story. I don't know, to just complete the story.
Well, I agree. I mean, originally, of course, for many, many centuries, the goddess was the main focal point of worship. And then the male guys took over about 4500 BC, and war dominated more than creativity. And we had, as you say, and then we've been kind of with the shovel following the elephant lately, trying to pick up the mess that has been left behind, for example, the ecological destruction, but also, I think, the destruction of education, really. It's become more one-sided. It's about getting a job in a man-made world instead of finding our place in the universe, which was the original meaning of the university. In the Middle Ages, it was about finding a place in the universe, and the goddess, the divine feminine, was the overseer of both the science and the arts in the original university model in the Middle Ages. And I think that's been lost with the modern age emphasis on knowledge and technology.
Absolutely. Congratulations on the release of your new book, A Way to God, which is quite interesting from my point of view. I worked with Oprah Winfrey and the OWN team last year on a release called Belief. I don't know if you've seen that, but she traveled around the world to 33 countries and explored various religions to find out what it was that everyone was searching for, but also what we had in common. And there was another release of another documentary on God by Lou Gossett Jr. narrated that one. And sometimes I wonder, are we moving away from God? And here you come releasing a new book, A Way to God, Thomas Merton's Creation-Spirituality Journey. Could you tell us a little bit about how you were inspired to write a book about him and A Way to God?
Yes, well, as I mentioned, when I was a young Dominican in training, I wrote him about where to study spirituality. And when I was a teenager, I read his autobiography called Seven-Story Mountain. And it moved me, especially the contemplative dimension to it. But at the same time, I learned that it was quite dualistic. And his journey is so interesting because he moved out of this dualism. He was a very interesting fellow and very gifted, especially at writing. And he had quite a bawdy young manhood, including he fathered an illegitimate child when he was in England. He grew up in France. But he had a conversion experience at the Black Madonna Shrine in Cuba when he was 26. And he became a Christian, and then he joined this strict monastic order called the Trappists in Louisville, Kentucky, or near Louisville, Kentucky, Gethsemane Abbey. And so his first book was a big bestseller, his autobiography. It came out after the war, and a lot of men back from the wars were looking, I think, for something very different from war. And so they read his book, and they've kind of flooded the monastery. They got a lot of recruits from that book. But Merton himself was always on a journey, and in 1958, he was in dialogue with Dr. Suzuki, the Japanese philosopher who brought Zen to America. And Suzuki told him to read Meister Eckhart, the 14th century Dominican who was condemned a week after he died by the Pope of his time. And Suzuki insisted that Eckhart was really the one Zen thinker of the West. And so Merton got into Eckhart, and that combination, Eckhart and Suzuki, really shifted Merton 180 degrees from being this dualistic monk of the 40s and 50s to being a very active Christian and holistic in the 60s. And he was a real pioneer in interfaith. He met the Dalai Lama on his last trip, which was a journey through Asia. He died in Bangkok at just 53 years of age at a retreat center. And the Dalai Lama was only 33 when they met, but he made a big impression on the Dalai Lama and vice versa. And in fact, I just heard this weekend from a very serious Buddhist that the Dalai Lama was asked not too long ago, do you believe in God? And he said, well, I do. And then the questioner kept pushing him, and then finally the Dalai Lama said, I believe in the God of Thomas Merton, which is quite a compliment, I think. So Merton was a pioneer not only regarding interfaith and deep ecumenism, but also regarding ecology. He read Rachel Carson's book, Silent Spring, which many consider to be the first real important book on ecology, written in 1962. And Rachel Carson got fired from her job as a scientist in academia at the university because of the book. They called her a hysterical woman who was in love with bunnies and trees. But he loved the book. He immediately wrote her a 3-page letter and said, this is such an important book. He said, because of your book, we will cease using DDT on our monastic farm. And he went on and on. So he was like that. He was very smart, and he was at the edge of what was happening culturally. And he was, at the same time, he was a deep contemplative. He was the first figure in America, religious figure, to come out against the Vietnam War, and he's very strong about that. And he wrote a lot about racism in America and about the genocide toward the native people. He was not afraid, and he criticized the church very starkly. One sermon at Easter, the year before he died, to his monks, he said that we can easily be developing a dead cult of the body of Christ and a wax body, and so he went on and on. So he did not spare anyone in his very acute criticism of culture and religion. At the same time, he offered medicine because he had a serious spiritual practice himself, and was an authentic contemplative and mystic. Own right.
Wow, very informative, very rich. I didn't even know all of that until I heard you explaining it. And while I'm listening to it, I'm appreciating the fact that I am now accumulating more knowledge of something that is very meaningful. And, it takes me back, Matthew, to sometimes just how powerful our lives are. Again, something that is emerging from within our own beings that moves us away from our own limited way of thinking. And I think in Catholicism and just so many traditions, especially that one, we always hear about sin, and we always hear about the original sin. I mean, in Hindus, they just don't believe in that. They talk about karma. But, it's kind of scary when you are known for preferring the concept of original blessing over original sin. Please amplify the power of original blessing than sin.
Well, I wrote a book by that title, Original Blessing, a number of years ago, 1983 it came out, I think. And it disturbed some people in the Vatican.
I bet.
I learned how much an investment there is there in original sin. But it's a pity because, first of all, only humans sin. So original, whatever sin is, it's only been around, a few 100,000 years. whereas the universe has been doing its thing in a very beautiful and powerful way for 13.8 billion years. So why do we begin religion with something so anthropocentric and human-centered as original sin? But I also learned, you see, that the Jewish tradition doesn't have original sin in it. Elie Wiesel has said the original sin is not only not in our Bible, but he said it's alien to Jewish thinking. So the whole idea that you come into the world a blotch and is not at all a Jewish way of thinking. It's not an indigenous way of thinking. You say it's not Hindu, it's not Buddhist, and so forth. So, and it's not Christian. That's the point I'm making, that the church has taken a detour because of that teaching. It began in the 4th century with St. Augustine, and again, it's not really in touch with the real meaning of the scriptures, whether Jewish or Christian scriptures. So, and it's very debilitating psychologically, of course. For one thing, the church had never really defined what it meant. It was kind of foggy. And so for a woman, the original sin may be being a woman. For a gay person, it may be being homosexual. For a person of color, it may be a person of color being a person of color. So you see it's kind of like an empty pot that you can project anything into. So it confuses people. It takes away their dignity and their awareness of their right to be here. So psychologically and sociologically, it's very confusing and debilitating. And I think the reason it's even hung around is because it serves empires. You see, Augustine lived in the 4th century when the Christian church inherited the Roman Empire. So if you're going to run an empire, I think original sin is a good idea because it gets people in line, and they don't ask very many deep questions because they're so confused about their own beauty and their own sacredness and their right to be here. But all that, as you say, it's time to put behind us and to realize that all of us, not just oneself, but everyone we meet, is another Christ or another Buddha, and is in fact an original blessing, and all beings are, and not just human beings. That original.
I like that. I want to be originally blessed. I don't want to hear how bad and naughty I was. I mean, I enjoy being naughty. So what? Life moves on.
There you go.
And so you want to talk about the appreciative part of spirit, and you want to focus on the appreciative part of God and how that can relate to these times at this time, because we're so, and I'm saying this with all due respect, Matthew, I think we're so removed from our divinity, and yet we're only one step right close to it because we're so removed from it. Do you get what I'm trying to say?
Yes, it's closer than we think. And
exactly.
Again, that was Jesus' teaching. The kingdom of God is within you and among you. And that's the teaching of the Buddha nature, and it's the teaching of the cosmic Christ, too. That we're all other Christ, not just Jesus is Christ. We're all other Christ. I like your word, the appreciative dimension, because Meister Eckhart, the great 14th century mystic, says, if the only prayer you say in your whole life is thank you, that would suffice. So that's how important appreciation is, and gratitude. And once you have that, everything shifts, and you develop a sense of reverence for existence and for being.
Right.
And you expand your soul.
Right.
Eckhart says, God is delighted to watch your soul enlarge. And I like that. We're here to get bigger, not smaller. And to see the beauty in all things.
Beautiful. Now, speaking of thank yous, I wish our political arena had a lot of that in it. It's been quite an interesting time, and we're witnessing just a lot of fear-mongering and stirring of hatred and divisiveness. If you were to sit with the three presidential candidates, what kind of a spiritual advice would you offer them for the country at this time? And this really means a lot to me because of the initiative that we started in May.
Well, I think of a teaching from one of my important teachers, Buck Gostos, who was a Lakota teacher, an indigenous tradition. And he says, fear is the door in the heart that lets evil spirits in. And so all real prayer is about strengthening your heart so that fear stays outside the door and doesn't enter. And so, like you say, there's been a selling of fear, not just by politicians, but by the media. The media is complicit in this.
Yeah.
And they've even told us, the president of the ABC said this past month, that the reason they've given so much airtime to Trump is because it's good for ratings, you see. So that's another thing. I think that consumer capitalism is a secular version of original sin. Think about it. Because it's telling you don't have what it takes. You have to buy it from some outside source, you see. So to me, that's the exact teaching of original sin. But you're not beautiful on the inside. You have to get some outside redeemer to deal with this. So in capitalism, we've been taught that you have to be saved by the things that you buy. and that it's an infinite amount of things to keep the economy going. So I think that fear, you see, the fear of not being, what should I say, beautiful or wearing the latest clothes or driving the latest car or something else, all this, a lot of the advertising builds on this same fear, which is very parallel to original sin. It's a secular version. So I think that a real, Thomas Aquinas, the 13th century mystic and theologian, he says, a politician must know more about the human soul than a doctor knows about the human body. And I think that is so powerful and insightful. So, for example, Hitler, he knew the soul of the Germans in the 1930s, that they were resentful because they lost the First World War, because the Treaty of Versailles was very unfair, and because of the Depression and so forth, and a lot of unemployment. So he tapped into that resentment in the soul and then projected it onto scapegoat, Jewish people and Romanians and gay people and others. So he was good at recognizing the German soul of the time, and that's what he tapped into. And I think there's a danger. Now, we can talk about a good politician, someone we admire, say like Abraham Lincoln. He also tapped into the soul of the American people at the time of slavery and so forth. And I think, as he says, we have to appeal to the better angels of our nature. And that's what he was trying to do, to get people to think more in terms of justice and charity, as he said in his last inaugural, to bind up the wounds, and charity for all, to get over the battle scars of the Civil War. So I think I would say this to the three politicians, that how are you appealing to the soul of America? Are you appealing to the debased dimensions of resentment and fear, or are you appealing to how we can work together to solve our problems in a creative fashion? And these problems cannot be hidden in complete denial, such as climate change. I was on a conference in Florida a couple months ago when Florida had two presidential candidates running, and both were in denial about climate change, and their governor's in denial. And yet here we are in Florida, and scientists began this conference. They were talking about what's happening, and they showed pictures of what Florida's going to be like 10 years from now, 30 years from now. Big chunks of Florida disappearing because the waters are rising. And yet you have three politicians living in denial. And, Maestro says God is the denial of denial. So if you're living in a bubble of denial, truth is nowhere to be found. Therefore, God is nowhere to be found. So, I would address the issue of denial with politicians too, and the truth. Only the truth will save us.
Thank you so much for that, because I'm just capturing voices that I think are so important to be heard around this time. It just feels like we're going on, Matthew, like business as usual, and I think we need to begin to raise the right questions. I want to thank you
it's not a
for...
time for business.
It sure isn't.
Or religion as usual.
That
or
too.
politics
That
as usual.
too. That too. Thank you for the wealth of wisdom that you've offered us today. And before I let you go, and not that you haven't already said it in so many words, but what's your best vision for yourself that would make America and the world a better place?
Well, I think that we all have to wake up, and we can't rely on institutions anymore. I think there's too much investment their part in the past. I think we have to work what I call intergenerational wisdom. I think there's wisdom in the young and the questions they're asking, and there's wisdom to be had in the older too, but we have to join forces. We have to listen to each other much more than we're doing. And it's about creativity, isn't it? Giving birth to alternative forms of energy, and really we need a renaissance, a rebirth of how humans live on the earth. And this could be a tremendous force for employing people in new ways, for joy and celebration, as well as for strengthening us so we can carry on the struggle. It takes courage to bring compassion and justice into history again. And so we need to develop courage, which is the opposite of fear. And courage is two French words, a big heart, cœur large. So that the heart grows through joy and through delight and through awe and falling in love with life again. So I think all that is what's behind an awakening that our species requires today. I think a lot of people are feeling this, and they realize that spirituality is more important than religion this time, and religion needs to catch up. But meanwhile, we have to step out and stand for something, and so we have to bring conscience and contemplation to the table.
I get that. Thank you so much. Matthew, leave us with a website that our listeners can get in touch with you if they'd like some more information on your new book.
Sure. It's just www.matthewfox.org, Matthew with two T's, and you can go there and get connected to me and find out what I'm doing and where I'm doing it. And I welcome people's comments for sure.
I've really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you so much.
I have too. Thank you for your interesting questions.
And many original blessings upon you.
Same to you and for all of us.
Thank you. Same here. Take care. Bye-bye. It's so important to really be informed, and I mean informed fully in a variety of ways. And sometimes it might not be necessarily your main important subject, but then you find so much in it. Like when you surf on your Facebook, what do you see? A lot of things that maybe you wouldn't really necessarily be interested in, but then it catches your eye or your eyes, and you're like, oh, wow, that's interesting. And then you learn something more about you. So hopefully you were able to take away something from our conversation with Matthew Scott. Remember, no one can take away your happiness unless you give them permission. And we are here to love each other the same. And let's keep having these pure feelings and good wishes for each other and live a life from the light. Here is bliss from Come Into the Light. Take care, everyone.
Where do I go with all these feelings and all these faces and open doors when everyone else seems so serene and I just feel so insecure? And where do I go when all the pieces of my heart lay on the floor? You say, come into the light, why don't you? Come into the light, why don't you? Come on now, come into the light. Where do I go with all these memories and all these bags filled up with shame? And how should I feel when you call me an angel, dress me in a crown of gold? And what should I do when tears of sorrow just won't stay inside these eyes? You say, come into the light, why don't you? Come into the light, why don't you? Come on now, come into the light. What should I do when a gentle hand reaches out to take my hold? And how should I feel when tears of joy, they just won't stay inside these eyes? And what will I do when I start to love you and really trust and know you're there? You say, you'll be in the light where I am. You'll be